What is up, heroes? This is Midnight Zero, and I'm joined by a very special guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, MoonlightSwami here. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. You got a lot coming up with the playoffs and everything, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants to hear all your thoughts on the season thus far and the playoffs and potentially even next season. So I figured, well, that's why we have an interview. And of course, everyone watching knows that this is an interview, so it's not like they're surprised or anything. But yeah, how are you doing today before we hop into the interview?
I'm doing great. How about you?
A little sleep deprived, as always, but you know, hanging in there. It's all you can ask, right?
Absolutely.
So, okay, so with regards to the interview, let's take a look at the season in retrospect. So let's take a look back at all the weeks that led up to this relatively, very successful regular season. So overall, are you happy with how you did? Obviously you did well, but you know, everyone has their own personal benchmarks.
The answer is no. I'm not.
And why is that?
Well, for all intents and purposes, if I went 10-1 or 11-1, I'd be happy because when I lost to the Tampa Bay Lux Rays, I lost on a roll. It was, I had about a 30% chance to kill his Diancie with my Volcarona, and if I did that, I won. And he lived with 1 HP. Or 2 HP, whatever it was. It was that close. I thought I had set myself up in a decent spot, but it just didn't work out in my favor. I can live with that. But the way that I played against the Vikavolt in Week 11 and against the Hampshire Haunters in Week 9, I was very disappointed in my own performance, and I thought my prep was decent, but it wasn't good enough, and my play wasn't good. So from that perspective, those 2 weeks specifically stick out, that those were areas that I really could have improved upon.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, even in the success, looking back at your losses, I find that you can typically learn the most from those, right? And yeah. So going forward, what do you think you've learned from those particular losses? How did your team prep not quite, meet the par or get the job done?
Well, when I faced against Goffies and the Hampshire Haunters, and I lost 5-0, that was a pretty big wake-up call to the fact that my weather was too predictable. He dominated me with a Manaphy that had hydration, and he had manual rain dance. And because of that, I couldn't get my sweep set up, and I didn't have enough offensive firepower either once I got rid of my choice specs on my Rotom using Trick to try to eliminate his Meowstic. So basically at that point, I just couldn't do enough damage, and I sort of went on tilt to the point where actually, you pointed this out, that if I had switched in predicting when he would go for a rest, that I might have been able to get him into a position, but I was so frustrated because I just couldn't do enough. I couldn't two-hit him at all, and that weakness in weather started the idea that, okay, I can't be dependent on sand anymore. I can use it, and it has to be, and it can be a function of my team, so I'm not going to abandon it, but it can't be like every week I'm bringing sand. It just can't work that way. I can't be reliant on it.
Yeah,
and
that's definitely fair. And
versus the Vikavolts, the thing that I did particularly wrong was I went a little too aggro, where I didn't have enough switch-ins on different things. I went double 4 times a week to Rock, and he had Rock Slide Goodra, and he had Rock Slide on Crocodile, and I mean, there was just, we went a little too aggro. I had 3 Life Orb users in that match. And while the end score was at least closer at 2-0, it was not a close match at all. He had me from the jump. So for those two, I felt like both of those losses came because of weather, because he had Alolan Ninetales in the back, and he was able to get rid of my sand for Excadrill at the end, so I had no way to combat against the Infernape. Even though Mach Punch would have done a lot, I could have lived one. So, it was just one of those things that I lost twice to weather, and I lost once to Trick Room, which was kind of fun. That was a really interesting set, but the 2 weather ones were the big, like, okay, how can I show different things to my opponents so that I'm not predictable?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And so to kind of turn things around a bit, what do you think you did really effectively this season? What do you think led, in at least part to your success?
I think the fact that I was so hyper-aggressive was probably the biggest factor. There were some games where I just set myself up early with a mid-game sweeper and then a late-game sweeper, and I took out some really big threats that my late-game sweeper could then handle. And I think just the fact that I was that aggressive, that I put people on their heels early, the same thing that happened to me in those 2 games, I did to as many teams as I possibly could throughout the season. And I think it worked out. I think the biggest ones were against the Choice Specs, the Orlando Magikarp, going for a trick, putting Choice Specs onto his Snorlax, and then setting up with Tyranitar in his face with Rock Polish. And then the other one probably would be the Haxorus this past week against Gearhart, that I weakened Mantine to the point, which was his defensive wall, that he couldn't live a Dragon Dance. So he was in a position between Mold Breaker, Haxorus sweeping his team if he didn't Scald Burn me, or losing the Mantine if I don't go for a Dragon Dance. And I went for one, and that led to that sweep. So I think it's really the idea that I was able to just put a tremendous amount of pressure on people and be able to chunk things enough that I could safely set up in the face of different Pokemon and go from there.
Sounds pretty accurate. One thing that I always thought was interesting is how you've used Tyranitar this season. Typically, at least from my own experience and from other league experience I've seen, Tyranitar is often seen as kind of like the sidekick to Excadrill or some other sand sweeper. But I feel like, especially when you're mentioning these mid-game sweepers and these late-game sweepers and being able to put pressure on things, a lot of times that comes from rock polishing up or dragon dancing up with a Life Orb Tyranitar that not only sets up sand for your late-game sweeper, which is probably going to be your Excadrill, but also just destroys certain walls, certain checks, and really weakens things to help set up for that Excadrill. And I wanted to hear if that was like something you thought of when you first drafted the team, or if that was something you've seen before, or if that was something that just kind of fit into your general play style.
Well, basically what it came down to was this. I was not really considering Sand at the very beginning. I went Mew, then I went Excadrill. And at that point, I believe Gearhart went with Hippowdon, which was probably what I was going to go for. And then the next round, Vump went with Gigalith. So my Sand setter was gone, basically. And I was kind of wary of Tyranitar because of the fact that it has its 4 times weaknesses. And it has a lot of flaws to it, but it's a very powerful Pokemon. And then the round started going on, and it got later and later, and it's still there. And I'm thinking, well, who should I go after? Should I go after Tyranitar or Conkeldurr as my last Pokemon from the Tier 1? And I said, well, Conkeldurr's a monster, but if I get Tyranitar, not only can I set up Excadrill, but I could also set up Sand as a whole, which is useful chunk damage, and I could use Tyranitar as a threat and try doing some unique things with it and make my team less predictable. So that was really the... Exactly. So that's why I went with Tyranitar, and my assistant coach and I really discussed it heavily. I think that was a really big one for us, that having Tyranitar be able to do so many different things makes it so valuable to the team, because you really don't know which Tyranitar you're going to get in a given week.
You've run Dragon Dance, you've run Rock Polish, you've run Physical, Special, Mixed.
Assault Vest, Max Special Defense, so I could live a Tapu Lele Focus Blast in the sand.
Yeah. It's,
with a lot of health left.
Yeah, you've really put this Tyranitar to work. Would you say that Tyranitar has been your most valuable Pokemon this season?
I would say that it probably has been, because it can do so many different things. I think the alternative would be Mew.
I was about to say, when it comes, any Pokemon you mentioned can do so many different things. The first thing to come to mind is Mew. But
yes.
But you would still say Tyranitar?
Yeah, I think Tyranitar probably, because no matter what, I ended up, because of the way that the team is built, using Mew in a lot more of a defensive way, when I think Tyranitar on any given week, you really don't know what you're going to get.
Okay, that's fair. So, looking in retrospect, how would you change your team if you could? Would you change your team? Do you like your draft overall? Do you feel like there's something you're just missed, or would really appreciate having on your team that now you know that it's not there?
Well, one thing that I really wanted from the very beginning was Slurpuff. And Skylar, the Duke City Doublades, took Slurpuff about 2 picks before me. And it was probably sniper. Around like 10 or so. And I just sat there and said, if I had gotten Slurpuff, because I like to just do different things, I would not have had a single type weakness on my team. Every single type, I would have been either at neutral or had more resist than weaknesses with Slurpuff. And that's how we built the team, that we want to account for everything. And eventually, we went with a bulky water in Slowking, and we dropped it very quickly. When Wishy-Washy became available, I thought that was great. When Volcarona became available, I think that was the crux to our team. But once we got Volcarona, Scyther had no purpose. So I think we had one spot in Scyther that is a dead weight, and I really would have liked a better wall. I think Weezing and Rotom both can be very useful in that regard, same thing with Kecleon, but they're low HP, high defense or special defense mons that I feel like if we had a true wall, I could really unlock the potential of Mew more, because then I could do more things with it.
Right, despite Mew being able to do so many different things, there was always pressure on it to play that defensive role because of its just natural bulk.
Yes, and because it was the real bulkiest thing that we had on our team, period. So it played that role so well, and it was also able to chunk things so well with Super Fang that it really wasn't much of a discussion on whether Mew played a different role or not. But if we were facing a team that, didn't have a physical psychic type, then Weezing was a good idea. And if we didn't have one that...
Mold Breaker.
Well, yeah, Mold Breaker too. But we kind of monopolized Mold Breaker.
I was going to say, you had the best Mold Breaker users, really.
Yeah, so that was part of the goal. I wanted to monopolize the Mold Breaker and then get Levitate Mons that had only a few weaknesses, and one of them was ground. So that's why we actually reached on Rotom Heat a little bit, but I wanted a fire type that was not a ground weakness because of Excadrill and because of the fact that we were maybe going to go after Gigalith or Tyranitar. So I wanted to have that fire type that could avoid it and that wasn't 4 times weak to rocks. So it was between like Moltres and Rotom Heat, and I'm like, no, this is the mon that we need to get. And then we ended up getting Volcarona anyway. So that dual fire was nice.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so one last thing about the season up until this point is, what would you say is your most memorable match? I guess more so in a positive light, right? You said those losses are still lingering with you, but which battle was the most fun? Which one did you enjoy the most up until this point?
Well, I think both of my matches versus Lindo were extremely intense, heart-pounding adventures. The match that I had the most fun with was my loss against the Tampa Bay Luxrays.
Wow.
It was about a 50-minute match, and it felt like it was about 15 minutes. It was so fast-paced, it was so exciting. I had so much fun with it. But my favorite moment, period, this season was going for rest with Wishy-Washy against Elliot.
I love that moment too. That was very great.
I was like, oh, he's definitely not going to take this thing out. Uh-oh. And that moment was my favorite moment of the season for me.
That was pretty great. No one saw it coming, and that turned into quite the clean sweep.
Indeed.
But okay, then let's take a look at the playoffs. Let's take a look at your road, your path to victory if you do obtain it. And the first opponent you have is Big Pum Gaming, coach of the Rochester Rhydons. How do you feel about this matchup? How do you feel about Pum in general?
Well, first off, Pum is a great dude, so I look forward to facing him. I was a little disappointed that I didn't get a chance to face him earlier in the season because of conflicting schedules. He was actually very nice. I guess he had a lot of faith in Lindo because he volunteered Lindo to battle for me, up against me, even though I was the one with the scheduling conflicts more so than he was. So that was really nice of him, but I look forward to facing him because, one, he has a very interesting team, and two, he's a really good battler. So, Kyurem Black gives our team some trouble because it might not be Mold Breaker, but Terravolt is the same thing.
Right.
So that's a little scary. Florges has its ups and downs against us. Same thing with Fortress. Spiritomb is a Pokemon that I really like, but that's where the Slurp Up would have been really helpful too.
Oh,
I guess for both of them, for Kyurem and for Spiritomb, because we don't have a pure Fairy type, even though we have some mons that can gain Fairy type attacks. And there's no Hidden Power Fairy, mind you.
Right.
Which they have to add. So, things like that. When I faced him the last time, obviously it was Lindo, so I don't have much of an idea of how Pum plays from personal experience, but he has an idea of how I play against his team.
Oh, okay.
So that's a little bit scary, but I'm really excited to see exactly how the match goes, because his team's interesting and I'm looking forward to it.
That's always good. It's always nice when you can look forward to playing someone when you know that they're a good battler, when it's going to be a good match, when it's going to be a good test of skill. They have an exciting and a good team to play, and it seems like, at least from my perspective, you're a person who's very much about having like a good, clean, well-fought battle. It's more so an enjoyable battle if both people try their hardest and are able to prep effectively and battle well, and the winner, has a well-earned victory. So, like the fact that your favorite match was one of your losses, but it was one that came down to the wire, came down to a roll, you still feel really confident, you put yourself in a good position there, and I'm sure you feel that the exception did the same. That really kind of speaks to that. And so that's pretty cool. I hope that your match against Pum is the same way.
Thank you. And also, I build my team to eliminate as much RNG as possible. I think that's a pretty big deal as well.
Agreed. I feel like that's a topic not talked about too often, is that a lot of people just kind of assume RNG is a part of Pokemon, and I mean, it is, but don't really do as much to avoid it, and rather just kind of passively concede to it being there. But a lot of times, you can build around that sort of a thing. You can, rather than draft Mega Medicham, you can draft Mega Lopunny, which has a stab return in addition to its stab high jump kick. So you have the option not to go for a 90% accurate move. You can choose to put Flamethrower and calc accordingly. Maybe plan on getting hazards up so you don't have to go for Fire Blast to get a particular kill. That sort of
thing. Yeah, like for Volcarona, I don't think I've run Flamethrower or Fire Blast once this year. I run Fiery Dance because I get that 50% chance to boost my special attack, but it's also the fact that it's 100% accurate. So the 80 damage I can live with, because I know that if it gets that 50%, which, well, that might be some RNG in itself, I'm not going to miss.
Right. And it's not like you would plan on that 50%. It's you would plan on it hitting with a nice potential bonus, rather than have to gamble every single time. You just want that damage.
Yes, exactly. And if it starts to snowball, then it starts to snowball, and they have to deal with it. But I've only run, the worst accuracy I've run is 90% in Rock Slide and Super Fang. So, it's not worth it for me to do otherwise. You can live without that extra damage if you set yourself up properly.
It's so funny. I think the exact same way. But regardless, moving on. If you do beat Pum, you will be going up against Chris Cobain, coach of the Philadelphia Braviaries, who has the #1 seed in your division and has been playing really well all season. Are you scared at all?
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit. The words come out. So why are you not scared at all of?
I'm not. Well, I'm not scared of any opponent. It's not that I think that I'm the best. I think that when it comes to battling as a whole, I think that a lot of factors go into it, and I look forward to the matches against the best teams. Like, for those of you who don't know, prior to the season, we were able to request a few people that we wanted to face. I really wanted to face Galactic Elliot because we've been really good friends for a long time. And we ended up in the same division, and we had a really good match. I wanted to face the 2-time reigning champion. And I wanted to face Vump almost as soon as I could, because I wanted to get a pulse for where I stood in comparison. Not so much that I was afraid, not so much anything. I didn't care if I lost. I just wanted to face the best, because, if you ever play on the Battle Spot ladder or something like that, if you climb the ladder, you know what you're facing. You know you're facing high-level players who are really good, really experienced, do some quirky things, but you know what to expect. At that lower level ladder, you have no idea what you're facing. They could be good, they could be bad, they could be wild, they could be, whatever. So I always preferred facing the higher level players. Now, his team is terrifying. I mean, that's...
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Thunderous T and Mega Scizor are a terrifying duo, plus Doug Trio with Arena Trap. But, it's like, I look forward to it. If I get a chance to face him by all means, I'd love the opportunity to. I'm not afraid of facing people. It's
that's
just
awesome.
a matter of...
That's such a positive outlook. And that's really cool. That's really cool. I mean, like I can only say so many positive things about your attitude towards Pokemon and just competition in general. But yeah, no, I really hope you do get the chance to play him and, you know, not only test your skill but prove your skill as you have thus far.
One last thing on him, I think he's the best player in this league.
Ooh.
So that's another thing. I think he is. I think by pretty wide margin too. So
Wow.
That's just my thoughts.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I hope you enjoy hearing that, or listening to that. If you do, do so, Chris. So, I guess then, outside your division, who do you think are the most threatening opponents? Who do you think you might run into down the line from the other divisions?
Well, I think there are... If Elliot wins his match against John, I think that he has a very good matchup versus Dan, and he has a lot of experience facing him. So I feel like Elliot would be someone who I might have to face again if I do make it that far, which I'd look forward to because we're going to have a rematch one way or another, whether it be an exhibition match or just in the conference finals. But the teams that I look at the most that scare me are probably the Torterrapins or Luster City Pokemon Club. Mainly because I have a feeling from watching some of the other coaches that I can get a gauge on them, but T-Train is a really good battler. He has some really big bulk mons that are really just a pain to deal with.
Yeah,
you know,
Porygon
Cresselia,
2,
Donphan, Porygon 2, even Gyarados with Intimidate
even
really
Magearna,
slows things down. Yeah, Magearna's scary, but it's one of those things that I built my team in a way to handle the top Pokemon in the format. That's the way that we want to build. So I wanted that Mold Breaker, the Steel type.
Yeah, I mean, think about Excadrill. You got Mega Metagross, Tapu Lele, you got Magearna, all covered just with that Excadrill.
Yep, and then I got Rotom Heat to deal with Celesteela.
Right.
Sylveon was a top 5 mon. Coco. I mean, you know, that was the idea, that I wanted something that could deal with everything. So from that perspective, his team's pretty scary. But Mega Charizard X, I think, is probably one of the scariest mons, period, because it hits so hard with Flare Blitz that I don't think there's a single Pokemon in the format that could live to Flare Blitz except for like something that outright resists it.
It's so funny. Sorry to bring up my own experience, but in my own league experience, I tried to use Tapu Fini as a counter to Megazard X, and it wasn't even great because it's not like I could Toxic it with my Tapu Fini, and it's not like I could Scald it for even much damage. It can roost off damage, and at +1, it pretty much 2-hit KOs after like a little bit of hazards damage. So yeah, it doesn't even matter if you quad resist a Flare Blitz, it's still gonna do a ton of damage.
I think Regirock is the only thing that could live 2 at +1.
Wow.
So I mean, when you have 802 Pokemon and you only have one that can really live that, I guess except for Flash Fire Pokemon.
Right, of course.
So,
immunities are, another thing.
But at that point, you go for a Dragon Claw or something, and you just kill it anyway. Yeah, so, it's just one of those things that I think his team is scary. Whimsicott, even though he only brought it once, is just a pain to deal with. JPP had Lucario last season, so I know all about how good it can be, plus its priority, whether it be Vacuum Wave or Bullet Punch or whatever. Yeah. And Nidoqueen too. Wow, he drafted like half of JPP's team. No, but so either way, I think Kelly's a really good battler as well. So I'm not going to take anything away from Jerry and Bub and the rest of the coaches, but I do feel like out of all the coaches, I have the best matchup versus Elliot and versus the Choice Specs, because the Choice Specs just astounding rock weakness. 5 Pokemon that are weak to rock type, which is why T-Tar ran through his team when it did.
Yep.
So, it's one of those things that I look forward to whomever I face, but I think those are the biggest threats. And yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So, with all these threats lurking in the playoffs,
yes.
Will your prep, will your strategy, will your mentality change at all?
I think it has to. I think when you have 13 or 12 battles worth of tape on you, and if you do team builders, that's even more information, that you have to pull some tricks out of the bag, but you don't want to pull out everything. This week against Pum, I have some really fun sets that I'm going to be running, and
Might you even call them heat?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because this is going up afterwards, I don't mind divulging some of it. I'm running a Shuckleberry Rotom.
Ooh.
I'm running a
Mold Breaker. Earth Power.
Yep, and I'm running a Magnet Rise Excadrill.
Whoa. Whoa,
With
I look forward.
Salicberry.
I really hope that gets to come to fruition in the match.
With Salicberry, too. So
With Salic.
yeah, so, you know, those are some things that I'm going to try to do. I'm not going to try to go completely out of the box. You know, I'm running some standard sets on my Volcarona and my Haxorus, but I think when you face off against people, especially if you faced them before, that you have to do things that are outside the box that they wouldn't even expect from you. So I've saved some tricks, like I was talking to my assistant coach, and I'm not going to talk about these because I'm not doing them yet, and
right.
I don't want to give that away, but there are some things that I want to run that are just complete fire that people won't expect, that I think can be really effective. You know, I don't want to just be outside the box just to be outside the box. I want to
It's got to be effective. It's got to be effective. You know,
like
surprise factor is important, but it also has to be, like, it has to take advantage of what's good about a particular Pokemon. It can't just be surprise factor alone won't win you games.
Exactly. So, you know, I think a good mix of surprise and not surprise really makes things entertaining, besides the fact that I think you can really it's hard to stop sometimes because you don't expect it. Like I'm looking at this set right here, a Chestnut, which is probably one of the biggest threats to my team from Pum, because I don't like it, and it has spiky shield and whatnot. I am carrying Flamethrower on my Kecleon this week. For Fortress and for Chestnut. It one-shots Fortress, and if it gets a burn, it'll kill it because it has Sturdy. And it does 44 to 53% to a max HP, max defense Chestnut. With no investment.
Wow.
So, you know, it's things like that where if you can just catch someone off guard enough, then you can set things up, like whether you're rocking Super Fang to chunk things, that when you get something down to half, and it doesn't have, you know, accessible recovery like a Blastoise, like a Mega Blastoise, you will fear anything that could kill it. And that changes your mindset. You put people on tilt by putting them into a range.
Instill fear in their mind.
Exactly. I don't like the idea of preparing for Pokemon at 100%. I think it's cool that if you have a switch and that you can take one out, but I feel like the priority threats, if you play your match well, you're going to face things at 70 to 80% for the most part. You know, some of those more glass cannons, yeah, you can prep for those to be 100% because those usually get saved in the back. But those walls, those intermediate types that might be circling through, when you get into that sweep situation, it's not necessary to take everything out at 100%. Just try to get into a range that you know you can take it out. So I think for my prep and battle strategy, it's basically going outside the box a little bit, but still maintaining the core of what I do, which is, you know, chunk and then eliminate.
Yeah, sounds like a great strategy to me. I'm just, as I go through this interview, I'm just shocked by how similarly we think about just Pokemon battling in generally. So sorry about that little comment, but okay.
It's okay, man.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so it sounds like you're really prepped for playoffs. You have an idea of what you want to do, and it sounds like you're looking forward to it, which you should be. It's you know, Pokemon should be fun, right?
My first postseason in draft format, my first real season in draft format. This has gone about as well as I could have expected, even though I have higher standards than what I did. This is you know, this is a good starting point, I think.
It's definitely a good starting point. And so, as a starting point, well, what's going to come next? Do you think you're coming back for next season? And if so, I want to ask about it.
Absolutely. Nothing in my life will stop me from doing it. I'm busy. I work, I do school, I do this, I do that. It doesn't matter, man. You can always make time for Pokemon if you care enough about it.
I like that attitude. I like that attitude. If anything is important enough to you, you can set aside time for it.
Absolutely.
All right. So then, looking at next season, what are some of your thoughts on banning Pokemon? I mean, honestly, I think there are some obvious choices, so no need to delve too deeply into stuff like Mega Metagross and Tapu Lele. But
yeah, I think Magearna as a third should be banned. Those three. Those are the only bans that I have. I feel like some of the other Mons might need to be moved around a little bit. Where, like, Manaphy was in S1, I think that's probably more of an S2 Mon. I think Kyurem Black probably should be S2 instead of Tier 1, but that's, you know, up for debate. So, I think most of the changes come, though, not from the top, but from the Tier 1 to Tier 3.
I agree.
Salamence to Tier 1 instead of Tier 2. Goodra to Tier, it's in Tier 1, maybe to move it to Tier 2, even though Dan is making a very good case to keep it in Tier 1.
Yeah. And then, you know, you have to ask then, is that Dan or is that Goodra, right?
Yeah, which it's both.
But
Infernape definitely should be Tier 1, because the more you get away from it, having a mixed Mon with such strong priority, it doesn't belong in Tier 2.
It's arguably the top of Tier 2, if not.
Yeah. Exactly. And then the last one probably be Dugtrio. I think should be in Tier 2 if it has Arena Trap. But, you know, I think a lot of the Mons are, you move them around a little bit, see what happens. But, you know, I think when it comes to Gen 7, we overestimated some, we underestimated others. Pangoro getting Bullet Punch definitely makes it better than a Tier 4 Mon.
Yeah.
I think so. You know, it really depends.
What are your thoughts on Zygarde 50%?
It's tough because we ban the ability that changes it into the 100% form, Power Construct. So Aura Break is interesting, but I think when you have a Mon that has an ability that's almost dead weight, you have to consider that. You know, it's not like it's slow start, but does it benefit anything? And I don't think so, right? Aura Break just eliminates the effects of
I think it's only helpful
Yveltal
against, like, Xerneas and Yveltal.
Yeah, so I think for the sake of where it stands, I think it's okay. I think Thousand Arrows is becoming more important because of the fact that it can hit flying types that, you know, like a Skarmory and things like that. So maybe, I don't know what tier it's in right now. I think it's Tier 3. But I can't actually.
Don't know off the top of my head either. I feel like it should be higher up.
Zygarde 50% is in Tier 2. I mean, I think that's pretty fair for it. I don't think it's good enough to be Tier 1.
Tier 1 with more of a spammable Thousand Arrows, but I mean, obviously, you know, personal differences. But
yeah, I think you can make an argument one way or the other. The way that I always look at things is, would you draft it over other Tier 1 Mons?
Right.
So I feel like you definitely would take it in Tier 2 if given the opportunity and you needed it for your team. But is it better than some of the other dragon types that'll be in Tier 1, you know, when Salamence is there and things like that?
Yeah. Probably
it's a balancing
discussion for a different video, I guess. But
yes.
Cool. So then in general, what do you think are the strongest Mons in now, like, the 7th generation League format? Because obviously the jump from 6th gen to 7th gen, we saw certain old Mons get buffed, certain new Mons were introduced. Do you think any new Pokemon or any Pokemon has made a resurgence and really established itself as a powerhouse in the Counter League format?
Well, I definitely think that the Gen 7 Mons that got into S1 are obviously dominant for the most part. I think Kartana is really dangerous. Magearna obviously is ridiculous. The Tapus, because of the fact that there aren't many ways to counter terrain, I think that's a really big factor. Like, if you get that terrain up, it's up. You know, how many Mons get different ways to get rid of it? And their answer is only a very small handful. If Mew had access to its Mew Z, that would also give it a Psychic Surge, which would make it broken. So the fact that it doesn't keeps it in S2. But I think one of the Mons that definitely has had its resurgence probably would be something like a Haxorus, because it has such variety of moves, being the fact that it can hit with a Steel type, a Poison type, Ground, Hard, Dragon type. There aren't many Pokemon that can just withstand an attack from a Mold Breaker Haxorus, which is why we want it on the team, and the fact that it's 15-2 so far on the season. I think Scizor, Mega Scizor, has a new and improved role because of the amount of fairy types. I think it adds that extra layer to it. I think pretty much ground types in general deal a lot of damage. If they have ways to get rid of anything that's in the air, I think you're really in a lot of trouble. But I think for the most part, the format of mons that we allowed are pretty consistent. I wouldn't say that there's anything that was broken except for the mons that should be banned.
Fair enough. Yep, I agree with you on that. So
any you think are dominant?
I mean, honestly, I think Zygarde 50% is pretty dominant. From my personal opinion. I also think Tapu Koko, in particular, is pretty high up there. Not to the point where it should be banned, obviously, but I think Tapu Koko, because of its momentum, terrain setting, and speed tier, there just isn't a lot that can consistently take hits on it. And because of Volt Switch and being such a fast Volt Switch user, it's really difficult to actually get it to take damage, right? Yeah,
and Koko actually was going to be the mon that I would have taken in round 1 if Jerry didn't.
Oh, wow.
That was, I was just a little too deep in the format. I think I was like 11 or 12 in the draft. But the way that we built our team initially was going to be Koko, and then if it was still around, Jirachi. That was going to be the start of the core. And instead, that didn't work out that way, which is fine because I think we've had pretty good success.
Yeah, you definitely made it work with what you did get.
One of the things that was really interesting was Z Mirror Move with Tapu Koko, which Z Mirror Move basically, if you are facing an opponent, they don't switch out, then you copy whatever move that they used, and you use that type Z move on them. Plus, you get +2 attack. So +2 attack really in your terrain with Wild Charge is... I mean, there's not much that can live that.
Yeah, no kidding.
And Tapu Koko specifically is a mon that you probably want to have as a physical type, because even though it has really good special attacking moves, the fact is it has better attack than it does special attack by quite a bit, 115 versus 95. And you know, you can hit U-turn, you can do a
Brave Bird,
Steel Wing, Brave Bird, Aerial Ace if you want to. Brave Bird obviously is better than that. And Wild Charge. So, I mean, there are plenty of ways that you can attack somebody, and it's just one of those things that, yeah, you might not get the fairy typing that comes with it, but you can always run Dazzling Gleam as just an extra type of deal. But that's why that, plus its speed, plus that it can use 2 different types of pivot. So if you're facing a team that has a prominence of ground types, you can use U-turn instead of Volt Switch. I think it's just a very valuable Pokemon. Also gets Sky Drop, which you can burn turns with if something's toxic, acrobatics. You know, the possibilities are pretty deep. Also has Thief, which is cool always, and Roost.
Yeah, and you can run like a taunt set. Yeah, there's a bulky Tapu Koko running around on the ladder now, and yeah, it's pretty cool. Light
Screen, Calm Mind, Rain Dance. I mean, Reflect. You could do a light clay Tapu Koko if you really wanted to.
I'm sure Lindo would if it.
Yes, I'm sure he would. So that's the point. That I think Koko, I agree, is one of the more dominant mons, but that's why we wanted it pretty heavily.
Yeah, good reasons to want it. But okay, so I think that covers just about everything that I in particular wanted to ask about. Is there anything else you wanted to comment on? Anything else you wanted to say about the league, the playoffs next season, your opponents, your team thus far?
Well, I think one of the first things that I have to say is that no matter where I am in this season right now, I'm already looking forward to next season and how I'm going to draft differently and prepare my teams and things like that. So, you know, I don't know how many people do that during the season or if they're in playoffs, but that's something that I've been thinking about for a few weeks, how I could improve upon my team moving forward. Obviously, I can't change anything this year, but, you know, how I would draft differently, things that I feel like we've lacked, things that we definitely could improve upon. I think having a fairy type would have been very nice. Shiinotic just wasn't it, just wasn't fast enough. It was more of a wall, and it wasn't the best in the world anyway.
Right.
But I think a fairy type, and I think having more priority, because if memory serves me correctly, I think only Kecleon gets priority in Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch, and Mew gets Sucker Punch. So that's not really enough for me. I think that speed can kill, but when you face certain mons, that it's just, you need a little bit more.
Right.
And as for anything to say to, the viewers, I appreciate all the support I've gotten throughout the season. It means a lot. I battle a lot, and I think that really helps. I probably battle 4 to 5 times on Showdown, just, random battles or something in between different things I'm doing, just so I can stay sharp and, learn new move sets, learn new things about Pokemon, Even though the levels are skewed for randoms to make it more competitive, you learn things that those Pokemon can run, different sets that may work if you go into a 50-50 battle, level 50s only, different abilities. I had no idea that Linoone got Gluttony. If I knew that, then I might have drafted it as a belly drum user at the end because of the 50% berries now. So, it's things like that I, if you love Pokemon and you want to get involved with something like this, just keep battling, keep getting better, and most importantly, enjoy it. It's Pokemon. Things can get serious in it, but it's still Pokemon at the end of the day, and you're supposed to have fun. It's a game. So.
All right. Well, thank you for those words. I think that's a good positive remark to end this interview on. So, thank you so much, Swami, for taking the time to conduct this interview and sharing all of your wealth of knowledge with everyone who decides to tune in to this interview. But that should be all for now. So, I know, Swami, everyone will see you in your playoff match. So be sure to go check out Swami's match against Pum. Check out both sides. They're both great people. They're both good battlers, and it should be a really fun one. Obviously, neither of us really knows the result right now, so...
yes. Fingers crossed, though.
But regardless of the result, just hoping for a good, clean battle. That's
exactly
the most important part. And I will be interviewing some other coaches, so for those that listen in to multiple interviews, I will see you guys in those interviews. But until then, this is Moonlight Zero, and this mission is complete.
Peace.